Is participating in Steam Next Fest worth it? And if so, how worth it is it? I recently took part in Steam Next Fest of February 2022 and I got the numbers right here. So in this video I will first briefly talk about what the festival is about. Then I will talk about my experiences, what the results were for me, and lastly I will give some tips for you if you do decide to participate in the festival. Steam Next Fest is a week-long festival hosted 3 times per year by Steam, where developers can present demos of their upcoming games. Pretty much any game can join the festival as long as they can meet a few simple criteria. Your game needs to have a Steam page. The game should also be scheduled to release within 6 months after the festival. Your game has not took part in another Next Fest within the year. You need to release a demo before the festival starts. And finally, you will need to apply in time. Don't be like me who forgets to apply and then has to beg Steam to let me in. So these are all before the festival, and actually during the festival you don't actually need to do anything. But there are a few things you should do, and I will talk about those a bit later in this video. So that's the gist of the festival, but why should you join it? Well, you can get feedback on your game, but the biggest thing is visibility. Steam will showcase the festival on their front page, so it's a very good opportunity to get some eyeballs on your game and generate some wishlists. Steam has published a few reports about the data regarding the Next Fest, with the recent one indicating that participating games will get a median increase in wishlist of over 14 times. Meaning that if normally within a week you might get 10 wishlists, then during this festival you would get 140 wishlists. And that is the median value, so some will get less and some will get more. If you do some digging around, you can find many experiences of these festivals. I would say that the general consensus is that these festivals nowadays are one of the best ways to market your game. Okay, propaganda aside, I actually took part in one of these festivals just a week ago, so what were my experiences? Alright, so I have 2 graphs over here, the visits and impressions for my game during the festival. So the festival started on the 21st of February and then ended on the 28th of February. As you can see, I got well over 1 million impressions during the festival and around 8,000 page visits in total. So is that good or not? Let's see. I'll expand the timeline a bit so we can see what it looked like before the event. Alright, so as you can see, the impact was quite significant. Before the event I was getting something like 100 page visits per day, and during the festival the average is probably something like 1000 page visits, so around 10 times more than on normal days. Looking at the impressions, the story is pretty much the same, except the numbers are a bit wilder. Let's go back to the previous view so we can look at the graphs in a bit more detailed way. Okay, so we established that the increase in visits and impressions was quite dramatic. So now you might be wondering, what are these peaks over here? The festival started on February 21st, so I would assume that would be one of the busiest days in the festival, but it seems that wasn't the case, at least for my game. Still a very nice increase in visits, but it is overshadowed by the next day. So what is this big peak over here? Well, I did a 3-hour live stream of my game and I got almost 150,000 unique viewers tuning in during that time. So that is a very obvious explanation why I got so many visits during that day. Then it gets a bit quieter during the next few days, and then on February 26th, I believe this was the day when a Let's Play YouTuber called Retromation made a video about my game. I believe that is the reason why this day has so many page visits. Then the next day, I believe I still got some visits due to the YouTube video, but I also did another live stream during this day, which didn't do quite as well as the first live stream, but it still brought in a lot of unique viewers. I will show the exact numbers in just a few moments. Alright, so cool charts, but I know what you're all waiting for. The wishlists. Alright, so here's the chart for the wishlist during the festival. The shape is very similar to the visits and impressions, but there are also slight differences. The first difference is that the slope in these first 2 days was quite a bit more dramatic in the visits and impressions. So even though a lot more people visited my page during the second day, the rise in wishlist is not really that significant. I have a couple of theories why that is. My first theory is that since the first festival day probably had the biggest surge of customers, a large portion of people who are interested in games like mine already added to the wishlist on the first day. My second theory is kind of adding up to that, and the theory is that I feel like my game is kind of niche. There aren't so many games that look like mine, so people are not familiar with it, and because of that, I feel like they might not be so willing in giving it a chance. Sure, the uniqueness factor might score me some points, but I feel like the drawback of being a niche game is quite a lot bigger. So even though my game got a lot of impressions that day, I feel like the conversion to wishlist would have been a lot better if my game was from a genre that is more familiar, like a first-person shooter or a third-person action game or something like that. But still, it's the highest amount of wishlist I have gotten in one day, so these are good problems. Alright, and after that the curve looks quite similar to the impressions and visits graph, but then there's a slight difference that in the visits graph the line went kind of straight during these 2 days, while in wishlist there's a clear decline, and I think the reason for that is probably just that the festival was close to ending, so a lot of people who tuned into my live stream during this day maybe already had added the game to their wishlist, so the number of wishlist is quite not as similar as the page visits. So yeah, that's the chart, and in total during this time I gained 1,231 wishlists. A very nice amount in just 1 week. I had around 1,300 wishlists before the festival, so it almost doubled my wishlist count. And as you can see, this here says that on average I have gotten around 2 wishlists per day. Now I'm not fully sure what time period this is using, but I feel like that is pretty accurate. 2 or 3 wishlists is about what I see on average days. So there is a pretty monstrous growth in the daily wishlist additions. So if we compare it to the 14x number that Steam said was the median value, it seems my game fared a lot better than the median value. I have listened in how many wishes other devs have gotten during this festival, and based on those I would have assumed my game was about average, maybe a bit above the average. Many have gotten about the same amount of wishlist, maybe a bit less on average, but then there are also those monster games who have gotten like thousands and thousands of wishlists during the festival. Alright, but those are the wishlists. Let's still look at a few other numbers before we go into the tips. Let's take a quick look at how many people actually played my demo. So here we can see the big number 4,500, which means how many people downloaded the demo. Then if we think about how many people actually played the demo, it's this number here, so 1,500 people, so around a third of how many downloaded the demo actually started the demo. And the median time played is 11 minutes, which can sound quite small, but actually I think it's a very decent amount considering it's the median time. So 1,500 people played my demo, and I have to say I'm really happy with that number. Especially so since the vast majority of the feedback has been positive. Recently, before this event, I have been kind of struggling with the common indie thought like, is my game actually fun to play? Getting all the positive feedback has reinforced my belief that yes, while the game might be kind of niche, there is an audience for it and it is fun to play, at least according to some. If I sum up my thoughts about the festival, overall it was a very positive experience for me. So I do recommend you also participate with your game when you get the chance. And hey, one last thing before we get to the tips, I'll tell you a quick funny story about the festival. It was the second day of the festival, I believe, and I was kind of curious how my game is being received and how many people are actually playing it. If you go to the Steam Next Fest page, there are these 3 different lists of games. There's the popular upcoming, most wishlist upcoming games, and the daily active demo players. So basically just 3 different measures of popularity. Well, one by one I started scrolling through these lists, and you can imagine my amazement when I actually saw my game quite high on these lists. It was 13th on the list of most played demos and something like 30th on the popular upcoming. Not in the very top, but still, considering the amount of games in the festival and the very popular titles, I started thinking like, holy shit, have I really struck gold here? I was basking in excitement, and that lasted for a good 5 minutes until, well, I noticed that I had selected the puzzle category of the festival, which filtered out all other games that weren't categorized as puzzle. So out of all puzzle games, my game was doing okay, I guess. But once I removed the filter, my game was nowhere near the top, so it was back to being quite average. So yeah, that was one thing that kind of amused me once I had gotten over the disappointment of falling back to reality. Okay, finally, let's get to the tips that I have for you if you do decide to participate in a Steam Next Fest. My first tip is to use your live stream slots. During the festival you get 2 events for live streaming. You can live stream for any number of times and any number of hours, but during these 2 events your stream will get pushed to the top of the list of streams going on in the festival. Now I realize some of you might be kind of nervous about live streaming, so was I, but it wasn't as bad as I was dreading. Also, if you don't want to show your face in the stream, that is okay, and if you don't want to talk during the stream, that is also okay. You don't even need to do it live if you don't want to. You can record a clip of you playing beforehand and then just broadcast that when your slot is up. And well, if you don't even want to play the game yourself, you can probably convince a streamer to play it for you if you want to. Then my second tip is also related to the live streaming. Be smart when to stream. There isn't really one truth when to stream, but my opinion is that you should avoid streaming in the first hours of the festival. Based on what I saw, the first hours were really cramped with streams, and they were competing with each other to get attention from the viewers. Maybe if you're the most popular game in the festival, it might be a good idea to use the first slot, but otherwise I would avoid it. I would recommend streaming in the first few days, but try to find slots that other games haven't booked yet. I feel like the first days should have the most viewers since the festival is still kind of new. I was also trying to determine which hours of the day were the most suitable for streaming, but honestly it was kind of hard to determine that, and there were plenty of viewers throughout the day, every day. But with a bit of investigative work, I'm sure there's still room for optimization there. I personally picked hours that were comfortable for me, but also hours when I figured the US customers might still be awake. I ended up streaming around 10 in the morning East European time for all of the slots. And since I'm sure you're curious, here are the numbers for all of my slots. I used my first slot during the second day of the festival, and I ended up streaming for almost 3 hours. And during that time I got a peak viewership of around 8,000 people, and overall during the 3 hours there were almost 150,000 people tuning in. I was at the top of the streaming list for almost an hour, and even when the algorithm effect started to fade, I still had a decent amount of people watching me. It was actually kind of hard to stop the stream, because at that point I still had around 2,500 people watching me, but well, I had to go eat and do some other things. But yeah, I think I definitely did miss on some extra visibility when I didn't continue the stream. By the way, there's a recording of this stream on my channel if you're interested in that. Then my second live streaming slot was on the 6th day of the festival, and it was a utter failure. I go into more details in my recent devlog video, but basically there were some technical difficulties and I just wasn't getting the viewers I was supposed to get. So yeah, that resulted in basically no visibility at all. But luckily Steam was nice enough to give me a third slot due to these issues, which I used on the 7th day of the festival. During that time I got a peak viewership of a bit above 1000, with around 20,000 unique people tuning in during the almost 3-hour stream. So not as good as the first stream, but still a lot better than the second one. Next time I think I will try placing all my slots in the first few days. Then my third tip is still kind of related to the live streaming, and that is to utilize rebroadcasting. What I didn't realize beforehand was that the festival actually has this list of streams visible all the time, not just during the scheduled events. So you can stream outside of your scheduled slots and there is still a very good possibility that people will tune in. Especially if your game is entertaining to watch, it might very well pop up near the top of the stream list. But most people don't have enough stamina to play their own game throughout the whole day. What you can do is record a clip of you playing the game and then just stream that on loop during the whole festival. This is perfectly fine for Steam, and the only thing they advise to do is to let the people know that it is not a live broadcast, for example by adding a visible rebroadcast tag on the video. This is what many games were doing throughout the festival, and something that I also would have done from the very beginning of the festival if I had realized that. What I ended up doing was that I recorded my first live stream and then just broadcasted that on loop during the rest of the festival. Most of the time there were only like 10 people watching my rebroadcast, but it is still free extra visibility. Over time it amounts to a decent amount of unique people watching. And the only thing you need to do is just let your laptop broadcast the video file. As I understand, there are also services available for this if you don't want to leave your laptop running for the whole festival. And by the way, funnily enough, after the festival ended, my rebroadcast has gotten a lot of attention. It's been hovering around 300 to 500 for a few days now and it is still ongoing. I don't know why this happened, but of course it's very nice to see that even after the festival, people are still watching the rebroadcast. And hopefully they are not all bots. So yeah, in the next festival I take part in, I think I will record something before the festival and start looping it immediately. Then I'll just rapid fire the rest of the tips. Participate as close to the release as you can. The festival has many benefits, but the biggest one for sure is visibility, and you will get the most value out of it when your game is as close to being done as possible. Then, before the festival, make sure your tags are correct, because the tags will determine where your game gets placed in the festival. Be ready to fix bugs at the start of the festival and collect as much feedback as possible, for example by having easy feedback links in your game. Those two probably don't need more explaining. Then, this is personal, but I would advise not putting too much text in your demo and making sure that the tutorial is not too long. I was trying out other people's demos and in some cases I just had to quit the game because there was so much text and so much learning to go through that I just didn't have enough time for it. So I would advise keeping it short and sweet if you can. And speaking of other people's demos, I would advise also to participate as a player. Try out other people's demos and you just might find inspiration from there. And my final tip is to not miss the application deadline like I did. And if you do miss the deadline, it's worth begging the Steam support to let you in, like they did for me. Okay, that's all the tips I have for now. And by the way, I'm planning on making videos about how to upload a demo to Steam and how to broadcast on Steam. So if you're planning on participating to a Steam Next Fest in the future, I feel like those videos might be useful for you. Hey, if you like this video, I would really appreciate if you liked this video and also commented on it. Other than feeding the YouTube algorithm, they also warm my heart. Alright, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.